The Marino Show.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this show. We're actually here at a dog park today in the Sunfield community of Buda, and that's because we're talking to Ashley Clements, the director of Rescue PAC, a nonprofit dog rescue organization. And Ashley, why did you found this organization? What was it for you that really was the motivation behind this?
Sure. So the biggest motivation was, I think, just our love for dogs. So simply that. And then our experience with other nonprofit organizations. So we just really recognize how large the problem really was. And that's everywhere, but really there are specific places in Texas where the problem is just immense. And so not enough helping hands. And I think with our time in volunteering, we just decided one day, maybe we should go and invest a little bit more into this, and then even, bring more people, our own friends, and get them involved. And so really assisting with the problem in a bigger way.
How does the organization work with Rescue PAC? How does everything kind of come together for you?
So I can tell you about our process.
Yes.
So what the process is it can sometimes be a little bit complicated. It's never seamless. It's usually pretty messy, and that's because the situation itself is messy. So we are connected with a large group of what I guess we would call maybe street volunteers, and so these are people who live in the cities that we rescue from, and they see firsthand, the suffering that goes on with these dogs, and they care so much. And so,
Aww.
and just like she's such a great example of how this works, because that's exactly what happened with her.
And what's her name?
So this is Cassia and this is Emma here. And both of these have a similar story in how they were brought to our attention. But somebody who really cared and who saw them on the street with nowhere to go, hungry and suffering in other different ways. Emma had a skin condition that was terrible. But they reach out to us. So they find the dog, they do what they can to keep them safe. So they might keep them in an enclosure, keep them in a bathroom, just to keep them from getting hit by a car. And then they network to different rescues, including us. And so that's how we learn about the dogs. And then the next step from there for us is we find a foster home. So we work strictly through foster volunteers. They're incredibly essential when we couldn't emphasize that enough. So find a foster volunteer, and then we are able to take one of those dogs who are brought to our attention by these volunteers living in the cities, and then bring that dog into care. So once they're in foster care, we do all the vetting. So we have amazing doctors who partner with us, and we're thankful for that. But we get all their vaccinations and any other essential vetting. So if there is something more serious, and we've had cancer cases, we've had mange cases, we've had, wounds that needed treating. So it will vary completely, but we get them through their vet care. We get them spayed and neutered, we get them microchipped, and then we get them networks for adoption into responsible homes. So homes where families are well aware of how to take care of a dog, and if they are not, then we do a lot of educating, and that's kind of the process. So they go from usually being on the street or being in a shelter where they're on a euthanasia list, make it to foster care, and then get through the whole vetting process, meet some awesome families, and then through that adoption process, we pick the best family for that dog, and then that dog makes it to their forever home.
And this is really, like you were mentioning earlier, it's a really huge problem here in Central Texas where we are, because you hear about stray dogs all the time, but I don't think people realize the enormity of the situation. Some people obviously do, like yourself, but for you, how big of an issue is it for you in this area? Or what do you see in Central Texas kind of compared to other parts of maybe Texas or the country?
Yeah, so I would actually say that we are so lucky here to have, especially in the Austin area and in Austin itself, there are so many places that are dog friendly. And so we see this wonderful image of, dogs are our family. Dogs, have like water bowls at shops and they're welcome into some shops. And so for a lot of people here, I think that's the image and that's what we understand, pet ownership as is this is a really happy, super sweet and loving situation for the animal. But there are places, I think, outside of like the city itself. So, smaller communities further outside of, where all the resources really are. And here, so even, in Hayes County and Travis County, it's really everywhere. We have these communities who just lack access to, affordable vet care or even just the knowledge on how to take care of an animal. So an example is here in Buda, we got notice of a poodle who was so matted he could barely walk because he was just covered in just heavy fur that had been growing for so long. In talking to the family, which is what we decided to do instead of just taking the dog and taking it into rescue since it was roaming the street, we located the family and we, had the conversation and they just had no idea, like, where do I go to, get him groomed where it's affordable, or how do I do this myself? I have no idea. I've tried and it was too hard. And so they were just clueless. And then they were clueless too as to where they could even go get affordable vaccinations, things that made sense for their family economically. So the problem is large. In Central Texas, we see a little bit of two sides, the really happy and the beautiful, like, hey, this is my family member. But then we also see in some places, the mistreated or neglected dog. I would say there are other parts of Texas, specifically, like South Texas and maybe even like the Houston area or outside of that Houston area, where the problem is much larger. And there, you can walk down a street and just see like a gash on an animal's leg, but it's a stray and it's limping and there are 5 other ones right behind it and you just can't do anything because there are so many. And some of these people are so numb to that exposure that it's just, oh, that's bad. It's sad for me to see, but I can't do anything. So I'm just going to keep walking about my day. So the people who do step up and network to rescues, they're so vital and make such a huge difference for the dogs. But yeah, the problem is everywhere, and in some places here in Texas, extremely large.
And you're right, like here in Austin and outside of Austin, people are very much animal lovers. There's a lot of activism around taking care of animals. But with that being said, just what you were saying, there's also a need for a lot of education out there because we were speaking before we started this interview, and one of the issues that you run into at some of the shelters is they have a lot of people going to adopt, but then some of them have a high return rate because maybe they're not properly educated on what it's either going to take to take care of that animal or knowing if it's a right fit for their family. What have you heard when it comes to those kind of stories? Because that is something that's a major issue, right?
It is. And I would say that unfortunately that's what shelters run into a whole bunch because they are so high volume and so their processes can sometimes be quick, especially when they are in an overflow of animal intakes. So it is a problem. I think that, in adopting a dog, there is imparted that information briefly on like, hey, you need to do X, Y, Z. But I don't think there's enough time offered in educating on what happens if you don't do X, Y, Z, if you don't vaccinate, if you don't spay. Like, why is that so important? That information isn't shared enough. And so, yes, I think that impulsively people, get a puppy and don't realize that, it's a big financial commitment. It's a big time commitment. And then I think just kind of rolling with how things change with a dog, just like, we're not the same things, I think there are things in life that impact us and then we kind of change along the way. And it's the same for dogs. And so you have to be ready to acknowledge those things and be there to support the dog. So, anything from like fear to anxiety, when that arises, like how do you deal with that? And a lot of people aren't prepared because they just don't know. And so then it's a scary situation and they'd rather just rehome the dog, get rid of the dog.
And sometimes they want the perfect animal, and like
Yeah.
just like with people, people aren't perfect.
Right.
And this was an important thing that you mentioned too before the interview, that we're all a product of whatever we dealt with growing up, or whatever issues, trauma that we may have had in our lives,
Right.
which is the same exact situation when it comes to a dog. And that's how you have to think of it. They may have come from an abusive situation, and
Mhm.
now they're just being defensive, or they're reacting the way they're used to dealing with whoever was either taking or not taking care of them. So what's the message for that you want to get out to the public about that? Because it takes patience.
Yes, yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because it's so important. I think that the healing process for, just like you said, for people and for dogs is it just takes time and it takes consistency, but it's so doable. And I think it's so sad that they're given up on so quickly. But I think that resources are so important. Learning how to deal, with things like anxiousness or fear in a dog. If you don't know, then I think it's really hard to be successful in that situation. So I think what I would encourage is, for people to reach out to trainers or behaviorists because they are so great at providing insight, especially when working one-on-one with a dog, because they can really look at a dog's responses to a cue or to a trigger and then help you understand that better and how to resolve it. And I think if you can, it's just like with therapy, I guess, for a person, right? When you work with somebody closely, there's so much that can be done in terms of healing, but I think you need to be willing to, and you need to know who to reach out to. So looking for resources is important, and then just knowing that things are very manageable if you put the time and effort into it.
And you and your husband Sean have
hmm
dogs, right?
hmm
And do you have any that you've rescued that are your own?
We do.
Hmm.
Yeah. So Stormy Ray is our pit mix rescue, and she comes from South Texas during a time where they were just giving away dogs. So you could walk into the shelter, you don't have to pay anything for the dog, which is part of the problem because people think free. This is an inexpensive dog. This is great. But what we know in that situation is free is dangerous. Free is maybe these dogs are going into unsafe situations. Maybe they're going into situations where they just won't be cared for. So it was a little impulsive on our end, but we asked a family member down there to just go grab a dog, any dog, one that looked like it really needed help, and that's how we got our Stormy Ray.
What's the future for your nonprofit? What would you like to see happen with it? Because I know that you all do a
Yeah.
lot and you've done a lot so far, but what would you like to see in the future?
Yeah, also a super awesome question because I think that we have big ideas on ways to help on a deeper level. I think what we're doing now is just really almost like in medicine, symptom management. It's really not solving the issue. And the issue is lack of education in communities, lack of resources. And then, on that symptom level, like a safe holding place. So we're always really sparse on foster volunteers. It's so hard to we just receive so many requests on a daily basis, and we have to say no to so many dogs because there are not enough fosters. So for us, we really hope to one day have our rescue pack ranch where we can have, holding spaces for dogs that are harder to place into homes. We have a couple of those currently, and we're actually fostering them ourselves. So the other option for dogs that are hard to place or that are just rescues do have that is a big challenge, is euthanasia for those dogs a lot of the times. And that breaks our hearts because it doesn't have to be that. So ideally, we will soon have Rescue Pack Ranch where those dogs who really need the most care and understanding can take refuge. And we are actually in the middle of renovating a bus so that we can enlist the help of a volunteer veterinarian so that we can get vaccinations to people in communities where they do have a harder time getting out, and we can get them at affordable prices. So going to these places, I think, is essential. What I've learned is through asking, as I've asked many times, I can pay for vaccinations for families if you can get the dog there, but even getting the dog there has been an incredible challenge. So where it's right at their fingertips, it's been so hard still. And so to resolve that issue, I think we're just ready to take it all to them, and to get it done that way, and have conversations while we're there. So not just do the thing and leave, but then, talk to them, get to know them a little bit, and let them know that we're a resource and that we can provide more resources.
Yeah,
So,
to give them a resource that they can reach out to when
right,
maybe they do encounter a challenge or something they're
right,
not used to dealing with.
right.
Yeah. If people want to become a foster volunteer, they
hmm
want to get involved with your organization, where can they go to find you and what can they do to help?
So that would be incredible. And I would encourage just to go to rescuepac.com. There you'll find a foster volunteer application. So super easy and free to fill out. Fill that out, send that to us. Let us know that you're ready to help out and get a dog off the streets or off a euthanasia list. And, we'll reach right back out.
All right. Well, Ashley, who do we have here aside from your husband, Sean? Who is this fella?
So this is Oliver. Oliver is a 6-year-old lab mix that we saved from euthanasia in February of 2021. So he literally came to us right after that whole freeze. But he was taken to the shelter after 5 years with a person. We don't always know a dog's history, but in his case, we do know a little bit. So he was with an owner for 5 years, then taken to a shelter when he just didn't fit the lifestyle anymore. His fear really I think was amplified when at the shelter because it was such an unusual space for him. And so in his, in just being so scared, he showed some aggressive tendencies that really just meant he was on the euthanasia list in an instant. And so we pulled him, we worked with him, and within just a couple of weeks, everything just all of his walls started to come down, and he really started to trust us and trust the new situation. So whereas initially at the shelter he was just this dog who was, too much to take care of, or too much, I think maybe not so adoptable because of, the fear and aggression. Now he is just like the sweetest couch cuddle bug kind of dog. So easygoing, so well behaved, super quiet indoors. Loves to catch flies, loves to take naps. He's just the sweetest boy. But in the shelter, you would never have known that about him, and
Right.
so we're really glad that we know how special he is and how he's social, friendly, loving. I mean, all these different things. But yeah, that's Oliver.
And it goes back to what we were talking about earlier, knowing a dog's past and their
Right.
history. And also, I want to mention that dogs aren't disposable. I mean, a lot of times, if
Yeah.
a family dynamic changes, then you also have to figure out how to adjust their lifestyle to that as well, right? And people don't
Right.
always, I mean, Sean, don't you agree with that? Because people don't always think about that. If you bring someone new into a family or something happens, that may trigger something in an animal that you didn't see before because
Right.
obviously, how would you know that?
Right, so that could be a stressful situation for them because they're getting used to a new person or a new animal that comes in the house. So therefore, you got to give them time to acclimate and get used to it if you really want to work with your dog or cat or whatever it might be to get it used to the situation they're in. And then over time, they do let those boundaries down and let things in more. So as far as for us, that's been the case. We had to work with him gently and slowly, and he hasn't had any incidents with us since maybe like 6 months after we got him.
And so, Ashley, even for families that maybe they are seeing a reaction like that, what would your advice be to them if they are dealing with an animal that was gentle before and then maybe they have a new child or they have a new
Yeah.
spouse or something? Because people don't always think about that does impact their behavior.
Yeah, I think in prepping for changes, within a home, I would consider how is my dog going to respond, and then I would maybe encourage them to enlist early the help of a trainer or a dog behaviorist because. Early intervention is the best way to approach it. But then if it's already happening, I would just encourage, the same thing. We all need time to adjust, and it's just with the proper guidance, I think it can be done. And so I would encourage families to exhaust those options before, I think before getting to rehoming or surrendering to a shelter.
Because in some cases, like you said, a dog like this that just needed some work and kind of get through the
Yeah.
process could have been on a euthanasia list.
Yeah, so he probably wouldn't. Well, we know definitely he wouldn't be here if somebody hadn't stepped in and given him a chance and just given him, consistency, patience, and love because that's what he needed. And you can't be mad at his fear. You got to love him through it, and that's what we did, and it worked out really well for him.
So Heather, thank you for joining me today. You're actually a foster parent to this dog, you and your wife Jess.
Yes.
So tell me a little about how this all came about for you.
Well, she had 2 dogs, and I also had 2 dogs, and we recently had to just put our last one down in December. And I've always had dogs my entire life, so we came out here. We actually got in contact with Ashley and her husband because we had a bunch of dog stuff, and we wanted to at least help out another dog. So we donated all of our stuff to the organization, and then I kind of just felt like it was a passion of mine to try and help out other dogs. So we went to an event and came across Mick right here and his brother Jagger, and I conned her into taking them home for the day, and
Aww.
pretty much fell in love with both of them. So we asked her if we could maybe foster them, and it's working out so far.
Mick is sweet. I've seen him running around here in the dog park. He's so sweet and gentle. What has it been like just kind of having him around and even just fostering him? And what has it meant for you two to have him in the house?
I missed having a dog. Coming home to an empty house was strange for me. I had mine for 15 years, so it's good to have somebody there that's excited to see you when you walk into a home.
And it's important, as Ashley was saying, just to have people like yourselves to be there to help foster these animals, right? For
Yeah.
you, is that important as well?
Oh,
You said that
absolutely.
you're a police officer, so you probably see a lot of animals out there, right?
Yeah, we get a lot of calls involving animals where we're having to take them to the shelter, rescue them from bad situations. So I've always, when I was on patrol, my nickname was the dog whisperer because I was always the person they would call when it came to dog situations, because I would be that officer that would go above and beyond to help out a dog. So I've always loved dogs.
And what would your advice be to other people out there if they're interested in getting involved with the rescue pack or just trying to be a foster?
Get out and help. I mean, these dogs, they are special. They need good homes. They've had a rough go in life, and they're the kind of creatures that will always love you regardless of the kind of treatment that they get. You can always count on a dog.
Well, thank you so much, Justin, Heather, for being with me today. We'll let Mick get back to his playing.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Well, Ashley, who are we with here?
So this is Cassia. Cassia was rescued from just outside of Houston, and it was her and her brother both. So somebody reached out to us. They had gotten our information from a family who we had helped rescue from just shortly prior to meeting these two, or her and her brother, and reached out to us. There were 2 dogs by a highway, so her and her brother were just basically living by a highway, eating rice that was fed to them by somebody who lived nearby, and just felt kind of bad for them. And so they were at high risk of being hit by a car. Shelters were full, so there was nobody who could take them. Animal control wouldn't come out to take them since there was nowhere for them to go. So their only option really was finding, either a good Samaritan to take them in the area, which that was not happening because we already tried that, or they had already tried that. So really, only option, I guess, in the end was just a rescue, and so we took them, and we just really, knew it was we take them or we let them get hit by a car or something else, just living out there is not safe for puppies. So when we got her, we could see her ribs, had some little patches of hair missing, but Neil and his awesome wife Sierra stepped in for us and served as emergency fosters when we had nowhere for her to really go. So sometimes these things are super urgent, and we kind of rely on people to just step up as quickly as we do. So thankfully they did that, and that helped save her life. And now she's actually adopted into their family.
So Neil, what led to the decision to kind of to take care of her?
Well, she just we knew she was in need, and we had just recently lost some dogs, and we were kind of have a void in our family, and so we took her on for the foster, and we fell in love with her, and we ended up adopting her.
And how has it been having her as part of your family?
Oh, it's been great. She's been such a good dog.
So this is just one of the many stories that I'm sure that you see all the
Yes.
time, right?
Yes, yeah.
And you've had some more extreme cases where you've seen some animals that were really horrible shape, right?
Oh yeah. So we have had dogs come in, with cancer, with wounds on their body, with sores all over their body. I think Emma's a good example too. That she was a young puppy who was exposed to parvo as a tiny little. Probably like 2 months old. Barely any hair on her body, and little red welts all over the place. And she is just like the happiest and most beautiful dog now. I mean, they all are. So, yeah, we see a little bit of everything, and it's always really sad, but it's always really amazing just to know that now they're safe, and then to watch them through the process of healing is even better.
All right. Thank you, Ashley. And if you want to help out Ashley's nonprofit organization, you can go to rescuepac.com and you'll get all the information that you need there to either become a foster volunteer or just to help out their nonprofit. We'll see you next time here on The Merino Show.